All right, I want to introduce Don McMaster, and I want to thank him ahead of time again for putting in all the work he has put into doing this presentation. And you can take it away whenever you would like to start.
It all began when I was born in a trunk in the Princess Theater in Pocatello, Idaho. Actually, I was really born in the old St. Joseph's Hospital here in Denver. My parents were a mixed marriage of an Italian Catholic, never married mother and a once married Scottish Irish Baptist father. In 1946, this was not a marriage made in heaven for anyone except my mom and dad. Since my dad had previously been married, a Catholic wedding didn't appear possible. My mother was prepared to marry my dad in a civil marriage, which would have been unthinkable to her family. At the last moment, it was discovered that my father had never been baptized, and therefore his first marriage was not valid in the eyes of the Catholics. He was quickly baptized as a Catholic, and they had a church wedding. My father was a professional baker, so there was not a lot of money in our family, but somehow my parents found the money to send my brother and me to Catholic schools through high school. My dad had had a very rough childhood, having to drop out of school before he finished eighth grade so that he could go to work to support his mother and two siblings after his father had deserted them. He constantly told my brother and me to work hard in school so that we would not have to labor like he did. I was a good student, except for math. I hated it, and so did the bare minimum, much to my lifelong regret. From when I can first remember, I felt different and odd, even before I could put a name on that difference. I first was called a faggot in junior high. Coming from Catholic school, I had no idea what that was, only that it was not exactly a compliment. It slowly became clear, much to my horror, that I was attracted to boys, and thus began a very long struggle. My parents rather, should have had no questions about my sexuality, since I was the only boy in Wheatridge who had memorized all the lyrics from Judy at Carnegie Hall by age 13. I dated through high school very unsuccessfully. I wanted to be a priest, and so I used my religious vocation as my excuse to avoid dating as much as possible. As I grew to understand, or so I thought, what being a homosexual meant, I realized that I couldn't become a priest, and worse, that I was going to roast in hell unless I could change. My parents lived near the old Lakeside Shopping Center, and I would go there to look at the book department at the Denver Dry. One day, when I was about 13, I discovered a book on homosexuality. I sneaked behind a rack to read what I could and discovered that homosexuals hung out in public restrooms. I immediately went to the shopping center restroom and found that it indeed was a homosexual hangout. While I was busy reading the graffiti, a man came in and exposed himself to me. I took off like a shot deer, but I soon returned. After leaving grade school, I went to Regis High School. Little did I know that there was another gay boy in my class. Neither of us knew about the other until we ran into one another singing with the men's chorus. All through high school, I felt invisible, though I ended up, along with the other gay boy, being selected upon graduation as one of Regis's 10 men of the year. The Jesuits could really pick their men. Needless to say, there was no visible gay presence at Regis, and nothing ever happened there other than in my mind. We were all good Catholic young men. I did have one major crush on a hopelessly heterosexual classmate, and probably made a fool of myself pining after him. In classic fashion, I loved him once in silence. I suspect, though, he knew I desperately wanted to be more than chums. Outside of school was another story. I haunted the restrooms at Lakeside. Once I called this guy whose number I had found on the wall and arranged to meet him the next day. When morning came, as I convinced my mom that I was dying and needed to stay home from school, she agreed, and I walked over to Lakeside where I had arranged to meet this guy. I don't know if he knew that I was major jailbait or just didn't care. He took me to his apartment. Being 16, the experience lasted all of 5 minutes, if that. I graduated in 1965 and took the test to enter St. Thomas Seminary. Again, I was surrounded by young men, but avoided any involvement with classmates. I remember a big scandal involving a classmate who had to go to the hospital where he got caught kissing a female nurse. He simply disappeared from the seminary without another word. This was an early lesson in what could happen to me if anyone suspected my orientation or activities. I did countless prayers and novenas, asking God to wave his divine wand and make me into a good boy with normal desires. God and his wand were seemingly unwilling to get involved with this project. During home vacations, I lost no time returning to my one sexual outlet. My experiences in such places caused intense guilt and shame. One summer, I had a job picking up mail along 17th Street downtown. Holy Ghost Church was close to the post office building, and during noon mass, confessions would be heard. The confessionals had only curtains covering the three booths. I ended up going regularly to one priest who always had short lines. That should have been alarm number one. He was always unpleasant, but I got the absolution. This went on for most of the summer until Father decided that the frequency of my confessing the same sins indicated that I did not have a firm purpose of amendment. In the middle of noon mass, yelling as loud as he could, he told me to get out of the confessional and never come back. I came out to what seemed like a church full of people to see who Father had thrown out of confession this time. My third year in the seminary was a real disaster. For the first time in my life, I was failing academically and was generally very unhappy. On the first Thursday of October 1967, my mom called to tell me that my dad had been taken to the hospital for emergency gallbladder surgery. The doctors had wanted to avoid surgery because of heart damage my father had suffered from being a heavy, lifelong smoker. On Sunday, April the 9th, my mom picked me up so I could go see my dad. We stopped at her house to pick up my little brother. While we were there, one of my aunts called from the hospital telling my mom she needed to come right then. When we got to the hospital, one of my cousins was waiting and told my mom the news that my aunt had been talking to my dad. Right in the middle of the conversation, my dad slumped over and was immediately dead. I returned to the seminary after the funeral. One Saturday, about a month later, I laid down to take a nap. There was nothing special about that afternoon. I was just tired and wanted to get some rest. However, when I awoke, I knew with more certainty than I had ever felt before that I needed to get out of the seminary and go home. I had no idea what my future would be, but there was no doubt about the correctness of my decision. I met with the rector of the seminary on Monday. He agreed to let me finish the last few weeks of the academic year. He also insisted that I was to tell no one at the seminary that I was leaving. That was standard operating procedure. When someone left, they just vanished. I found a job at the old Broadway Montgomery wards where I worked in the catalog warehouse, mixing paint and filling catalog orders. I was there for the next 7 years, both full time and part time. The dean of Regis College was the dad of a friend, and so I made an appointment to go see him and became a student at Regis College. I decided to become a teacher, a change of majors, which meant that I had to repeat my junior year. With the help of student loans and my salary from wards, I managed to pay for those last 2 years. It was hard, but I don't regret having gone to the seminary. Had I not done that, I would have always looked back with regret about a choice not tried. College went by quickly, and I enjoyed my classes. I still struggled with being something I didn't want to be and acting out on those desires in ways that left me feeling dirty and ashamed. I would run to confession, not at Holy Ghost, because I was scared of ending up in hell. The cost of leading two lives, one the clean cut college boy and the other sneaking around, was exhausting, just as it was for so very many gay and lesbian people of that time. I graduated in May 1970. My plans were to teach secondary social studies. That dream very quickly turned to dust when I found that high school teachers in history were also expected to be coaches. Since I have zero athletic ability and or knowledge, I quickly realized I was out of luck with that plan. So that summer, I called a nun who I knew, and she taught at St. Dominic's School on 29th and Federal. She said they had an opening in third grade. I interviewed and found myself an elementary school teacher. Looking back, it turned out that in a lot of ways, working in an elementary school was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. That first year, though, was my student teaching year, where I made mistakes that I still cringe at today. My salvation was I was surrounded by elementary school teachers who gently corrected my mistakes and gave me ideas on how to improve. I found that I loved that age of children, and even with all the dumb things that I did, I was at St. Dominic's for the next 3 years. The school suffered from low enrollment, and so in March 1973, it was announced that St. Dominic's would close that spring. I heard of an opening in third grade at Our Lady of Fatima in Lakewood, and I interviewed there with one of the most formidable women I have ever met. She liked me and what she saw in me and hired me to start in the fall of 1973. I taught third grade at Fatima for 3 years until a new principal convinced me to move up to sixth grade. That first sixth grade year turned out to be one of the worst years of my life. It was so awful that I ran away in March for a week to San Francisco. When I came back, the kids and I endured one another for the last 6 weeks. During that school year, I went to the principal many times for help. She did nothing. I came back to school in the fall and again was saved by my coworkers. I team taught fifth and sixth grade with three other teachers. They staged an intervention before school started and did all the things the principal should have done. They helped restore part of my confidence and gave me practical suggestions that made my second sixth grade year a totally different experience. I grew to love, most days, sixth graders after I learned how to not take them personally. Kids that age are hormonal, emotional hurricanes, but can actually be quite charming. And I'm still in touch with some of those kids even today. I taught sixth grade for the next 5 years and was planning to do so in the fall of 1982. Fate, however, had other ideas. The principal left school in the spring of '82. I was part of the committee to search for a new principal. We interviewed unsuccessfully all that summer. Finally, I threw my name into the ring, was interviewed by the search committee, and then by the school office for the Archdiocese of Denver. A week later, I got the call offering me the job. Now I was in charge of a school of 350 students. I was principal at Fatima for the next 10 years, growing the school to over 500 students when I left in the spring of '93. There were many challenges during those years, some that proved to be successes, some that left me with egg all over my face. While all this was going on professionally, my personal life was sinking further into a pit of despair and loneliness. I knew what would happen if I was outed. Today, I believe that the Archdiocese and a lot of my colleagues knew that I was gay, but we all pretended not to see what was right in front of us. I was still having furtive encounters that were predestined not to go anywhere. At the same time, I was frantically dating women I had met. I liked many of them, but with no attraction, there was no possibility of any real relationship. More than anything, I wanted to be normal and not have to struggle any further. I knew in my heart this was not going to be possible. I tried professional counseling, prayer to every saint I could think of, but nothing seemed able to give me a normal life where I didn't have to worry every minute about losing everything that was important to me. When I was in my early 20s, I went to see a priest who had been a friend of my family for counseling about changing my life. It felt better to be at least honest with one person. After several meetings, he said that I needed to begin desensitizing myself to the touch of men. We went down to the basement of the rectory. He had me take off my shirt and lie on my stomach on a table so he could begin this desensitizing by giving me a massage. I realize now how utterly ridiculous this sounds, but this was the early 1970s and priests were still like God himself. Anyway, he was massaging and I was feeling increasingly weirded out about the whole situation. Suddenly, his hand went down the back of my jeans and underwear. That was enough, and I took off as fast as possible while still being polite to a priest. I never said anything about this to anyone for a very long time. First of all, he was the pastor of the cathedral, and who would believe my word against his? Secondly, to have said anything would have outed me and been the end of my professional life. If being gay was like I was living and coming out meant going to hell as a result, then I was really tired of the whole thing, of fighting every minute of every day to be something I never could be. I was angry at God for having made me the way I was. To be gay was most assuredly not a result of any choice that I made. It was what I was from my earliest memories. And so God had evidently had made me this way, and his creation would consign me to everlasting damnation. The whole thing struck me as some sick cosmic joke, with God watching me tear myself apart. And so I began to consider the possibility of ending the whole thing by killing myself. I came up with what seemed to be a fairly painless way to simply drift off, to not come back, and to finally be free. Looking back, deep down, I think I was grasping at whatever straws were left. One Thursday afternoon, I took the phone book, y'all remember phone books, and looked up gay. There was a listing for a gay coalition, and I called. A man answered, and I told my whole sad story and begged for help. His name was Craig Henderson, and he is the closest thing to a gay saint that I know. Craig said that if I was really serious about doing something about my situation, I would meet him the following Monday. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop. Between that Thursday afternoon and Monday, I came up with every possible excuse not to go. But I was so desperate that I went. I walked into that coffee shop and there was Craig. We talked for a very long time. I'm sure that he just wanted to slap me alongside the head and tell me to get on with it. But instead, he listened and he became my salvation and a dear friend. He took me to my first gay bar and introduced me to his friends, some of whom became my friends. And so I became a part of a gay circle of healthy, happy men. In a way, Craig and his friends were my gay AA. Everything that I am today and every LGBTQ friend I have today, including my husband, can be traced back to Craig Henderson. It turned out that the Gay Coalition was not a place, but simply a phone line that rotated between the houses of five guys who staffed it as they were able. It was sheer chance that anyone answered the afternoon I called and that that person was Craig. Over time, Craig and I discussed the need for a place for men who were in my situation and didn't have a place to go or anyone to talk with. There was not yet any community center. Eventually came the idea to start a group for men who were trying to take that first step out of the closet or who were not socially successful in bars and bathhouses, which were the only social outlets available. Craig and I invited some other friends to plan what such a group would look like. Because many of us came from academic backgrounds, we structured that group to be a set cycle of 8 weeks, talking about specific topics and then starting over again, sort of like an elementary school of gayness. We spent about 5 months putting together topic outlines which the facilitators, as the group leaders were called, would use in guiding the discussions. We rented a space in the old Unitarian Church on 14th and Lafayette and worked hard to publicize this group. Finally, the first week of May 1976 came, and the first meeting of the coming out group was held. There were about 25 people that first night, which exceeded our expectations. Those attendees let us know in no short amount of time that they were not interested in a lecture series with a finite ending point. And so we hastily met and restructured the group into a discussion group with very wide parameters. The group met every Monday night with rare exceptions for the next 38 years. The group met, um, the group grew rather, and moved a few blocks east to Warren United Methodist Church. We met there by permission of the whole congregation, who were told who and what we were, and then made the rather revolutionary decision in 1978 to rent to an openly gay group. At its zenith in the 80s, there were around 100 men who came each Monday night, being divided into 7 or 8 discussion groups. The group continued to meet until it finally died a natural death in the late winter of 2014. I worked with the group as the facilitator who started and ended each meeting and conducted the business meetings of the facilitating group. I made the decision to leave the group on its 29th anniversary on the first Monday of May, 1995. The facilitating group once estimated that over 20,000 people attended one or more of those group meetings over the years. So I consider that group to have been a success. The irony, however, of me running a coming out group did not escape me since I was still not out at work. As at some of the coming out group meetings, there were discussions about the lack of social opportunities for gay men. A group, including me, came up with the idea of opening a coffee house for LGBTQ people. The coffee house opened in 1977 on the corner of 17th and Park Avenue. I worked there for about 3 years, but then had my attention diverted by romance. I had made a good number of gay friends, all stemming back to Craig and the people he had introduced to me. On January 28th, 1977, one of those friends finally talked me into going to a coffee house in Boulder. I really didn't want to go, but finally was dragged kicking and screaming, and most assuredly not looking for love. After all, there were just going to be college kids there, and I would be seen as an old man of 29. At one point during the evening, I noticed Lee surrounded by a group of men, and I went over. I noticed this Viking god had joined the group. I started to chat up this man whose name was Nolan. We chatted some more and danced. At the end of the evening, I gave him my phone number and never really expected to hear from him. But he called the next week and agreed to come to Denver for our first date. Excuse me. I really had given up on love. Nolan, however, had other ideas, and we continued to date more and more. And so began a romance with the love of my life. We were legally married on April 16th, 2017, at a wedding ceremony with all of our families present, including Nolan's 90-year-old parents who came from Holyoke out on the Eastern Plains. We celebrate two anniversaries, our January 28th meeting and our April 16th meeting. We are currently the proud parents of Sky D. Chihuahua, who celebrated her 5th birthday last month. In 1982, at a Chinese New Year dinner, Bob Moore shared that he was planning to start a men's chorus. Auditions were held in March of that year. We both signed up for an audition slot, became charter members of the chorus, and sang at the inaugural concert in June 1982. We sang with them for the next 36 years until we came to Sage in the fall of 2019. During my time with the men, I served several times on their council and was president of RMAA, the governing organization for the Men and Women's Chorus in 1992. I also spent several terms on the RMAA Board of Directors and had served as chairman of the chorus's membership committee for over 6 years. Singing with the chorus added another ball to my juggling act. Over the years of singing, I ran into former students who respected my need for discretion. When I was principal, someone wrote an anonymous letter to the pastor telling him that I was singing with the men. He chose to ignore the letter without making me have to lie that I wasn't singing. There was also a mini scandal when I was seen holding hands at the Denver Zoo, which was completely false. Somewhere in Denver is my gay twin who was at that zoo holding hands, who I would love to meet. I moved to St. Mary's Littleton in the fall of 1993, where I became principal of a 650 student school for the next 9 years. By 2002, I wasn't happy professionally. I had suffered a mild heart attack in early 2002, and my mom had died in September of that year. In 2003, there was a 3-day blizzard that dumped 3 feet of snow on the city. Nolan was working in Fort Collins, So I was home for almost a week by myself, contemplating my situation. I realized that staying on as principal was the equivalent of beating a dead horse. I no longer liked my job and had reached the end of my patience with whiny adults, both parents and teaching staff. When I drove up to school on Monday after break, I realized that was the last place in the world I wanted to be. That afternoon, I called a friend who was principal of a parochial school in South Denver and asked for a job. Her fifth grade teacher had told her that very morning that she was pregnant and wouldn't return next year. Joan offered me the job and I accepted. I resigned from St. Mary's effective the end of the school year and returned to the classroom in the fall of 2003 after 19 years in administration. I taught there and at another Catholic school for the next 12 years. 2015 was my 45th year of teaching, so I decided it was a nice time to retire. I subbed and tutored for a couple more years and then completely retired. As my retirement neared, I began to realize how oppressive had been the burden of playing the game to survive as a Catholic school teacher. I made my bargain with the devil of my own volition. Nobody made me do it, but like so many things you do when you are young and indestructible and think you know everything, my bargain proved to carry a heavier emotional price than I could have ever imagined. Now, I no longer have to worry about who knows that I am a gay man. I've even appeared on the front page of the Denver Post during Pride 2018 in a pose reminiscent of Gloria Swanson from Sunset Boulevard. Liberation is a wonderful feeling, knowing you can finally be 100% yourself and not to be continually looking over your shoulder. I'm looking forward to returning to the Sage community this fall, being with all of you and singing together. For those of you who are still awake, that's my story, and thanks for listening.
Unmute. Can I unmute everybody? Oh,
Yay!
Thank you.
oh, it's unbelievable, Don. I can't get over our stories. Everyone gives me chills, goosebumps, and thank you so much for doing this. I love you, and what a journey you have had. Don, I have one question, then I'm going to open it up for questions or comments. What gay bar did you first attend? You mentioned it in your talk.
It was a place on Broadway called the 1942 because the address was 1942 Broadway. And like so many of those bars that were along Broadway, it's long gone, buried under some skyscraper.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, that was where we went for our first date after our dinner and movie.
Oh, that's great.
That's great. Well, if folks have a question or a comment, will you please raise your hand or raise the computer hand? And maybe Julie, you could help me see. Oh, there's Jana or Julie. First question right over there. Go ahead.
Don, I just want to say, I just want to thank you for sharing all of the really intimate personal details of your story with us. I think it's easy to forget what people went through. And it's so important that that not be forgotten and that that be chronicled and that we know that. And anyway, I just really appreciate you for sharing all that and send you so much love and support. And I'm just so proud of you and everything you've done and accomplished. And I'm so happy to know that I know you and that you're part of our life.
Thank you. That's very sweet.
I
You wanna
know.
say anything while we're unmuted?
While we're unmuted, I'll just say that I just love knowing both of you guys, and I only know you a slight amount, but my first meeting with Don was on the phone, trying to get tickets to
Oh, that's right.
like 6 different times, trying to get tickets to the men's chorus. And then
We
when you
had quite a
finally,
lengthy relationship.
we did. And then you joined Sage, and I remember that, and it's just all uphill from there. And what a story. Thank you.
I think this is Mo. I was tearing up, and I think many of us were. It's just so touching, your story, and all the history that so many of you have gone through. Is there somebody? Larry O'Donnell is next.
I have to unmute. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, Don, thank you so much for telling that story. I've known Don for a long, long time. And I can vouch for the fact that the coming out group was a very successful venture and that he did. And I went to that sometimes in the 80s. But thank you very much. And also, I really enjoyed your story because it is a little bit different slant. As a non-religious person, yours viewpoint is quite different, and I really enjoyed hearing that. Thanks for your honesty and your truth. It was a great story.
Thank you.
Kate Burns, you have done,
Yeah, Dawn, I'm so proud to know you. This story is so moving and so important to our history. I'll repeat again what people have said. Showing how, we go from a place of no support to building our own support. And a group of 5 guys is the beginning of a huge thing. And you, one person, starting all these groups and all these things, so important. I'm just amazed, and thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
and this is Mo. Don, and thank you for being here, not here today, but here in general. Thank you for not taking different steps along your journey that we would have missed out on knowing you, because yeah, it's just terrible. And I see Kevin is next, and then Barb Brown.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on what Kate just said. I think of when I started with the Denver Gay Men's Chorus, how welcoming you were and the great work you were doing with the membership team. And I think, just between the children that you taught and the groups that you worked with, just the number of lives that you've touched and people that you've made feel welcome and happy in who they are. It's an incredible thing. And it's really amazing to hear it in a timeline order like that. It was just really fascinating. It was great.
Thank you.
Barb Brown.
I want to say thank you, yes, for your honesty and your vulnerability. And it's a beautiful story of self-discovery and self-acceptance. And I'm sure that you touched so many people along the way. And so I want to say thank you for that. And I'm really glad that you didn't give in to the impulses of hurting yourself, that you stayed the course, because it has been a difficult, time for many of us, but we paved the path for so many other people, and it was a necessary path that you took. So courage and heart. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Oh, Judith.
Okay, Don and Nolan, I'm just so pleased that you decided to join the Sage Singers. Been aware, Don, of who you were for years and years, watching you at the Gay Men's Chorus. It was wonderful to hear the fill-in about the coffee houses and the men's coming out group. Had heard little bits about that through the years, but I really appreciated getting the whole sequence. And also that about your career. Knew you had been a teacher and an administrator, but it was really, really good to get the whole picture. And I was moved to tears. And I know many of us were. And I would echo all the comments that people have already said. And again, love you both lots. Thank you.
Well, thank you to you, because you were the reason we came to Sage.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Any more comments or thoughts?
Don and Nolan, I just have to echo what Judith said, that I'm so pleased that you two came over from the DWC to Sage.
Yeah.
And I remember the dinner
It
that
was quite a change, Carol.
I remember the dinner the four of us had at the Wash Park Grill, and you had a lot of questions, and when you both decided to come over, we were just thrilled to death, and we have been ever since. We just love the two of you, and we're so proud of you and all that you've accomplished, and proud to have you on our team. And thanks for telling that story. Love you.
Love you.
Okay, I just wanted to say thank you very much, Don. I really appreciate it. Kind of brought back some old memories, and I appreciate the time that you took to do this as well. Thank you very much, Don. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ruby. It's nice to see you.
Well, good seeing you.
Hi, I just want to say you're just one of the nicest guys, and your kindness, I mean, you were like brave right away. You're just inviting everybody, and I just, you know, your warmth was amazing, and I just want to award I want to talk about your bravery, but yeah, it was beautiful. And actually, when you said you were Catholic, I kind of got all excited because I'm like, great, I can, you know, I think I could learn something from him also. So, you know, congratulations on your journey, and thanks for bringing it to us and just telling us everything, because we enjoyed the whole thing. I think I'm due for a good cry, and I might do it right now, but I'll do it in honor of you guys. Congratulations on your history.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Can I do one quick story?
Yes, of course. We have time. Go ahead, Don.
Okay.
If everybody else will mute themselves, there's some
Oh,
background.
no, that's okay.
Well, no, it's background echo sometimes. That's okay.
Well, like so many of you that have done this before, you think you don't have anything, and then you sit down and you do it. And there's a website that you can go to time how long it is by the number of words. And I would have needed part 1 up to 5 and part 2 from 5 to 12 and going from there. I mean, cut out a whole bunch of stuff, but the one I wanted to share with you was about the priest that threw me out of confession. I was teaching at Fatima, and I was teaching with this lovely lady, very, very proper Hispanic woman. And we got to talking, and without going into details about sins, I was sharing with her what had happened to me. And she stopped me and asked the name of the priest. And I told her, and she burst out laughing, because it turned out he had thrown her out of confession as well. So evidently that was a fairly regular thing at Holy Ghost.
Oh, we'd all be thrown out if we were more honest.
Well, that explains why Father had the short lines.
Yes, yeah. And yeah. Well, if nobody else has any more comments, I know I can speak for everybody who didn't say anything, that we just adore you both, and thank you for sharing. And it was just fantastic. And one last round of applause for Don for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
I do have one more question. What was the process like for you personally? Just reviewing your histories, putting it down.
Of coming out?
No, I'm sorry, of doing this story. Yeah.
Well, I was very reluctant, because I
know.
honestly didn't think that, you know, it was very interesting, or that there was enough to kill a half hour. As I sat down and started writing, as I say, I ended up with way more than I would have needed 3 or 4 hours to do it. And I thought that might be pushing my luck. So it's amazing. There were times it was painful to bring back some of those memories, and but it was kind of cathartic in a way, sort of cleansing.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. I think every one of us has said that. They've said the beginning statement, oh, I have nothing to say. And then after they've told their story, they say those same words, that it was very cathartic. And we're personally amazed at ourselves. Well, maybe I did go through some things, you know. So,
Yeah, I mean, without sounding like I'm bragging, I remember when the facilitators, because we never kept track other than counting at the beginning of each group, we never kept a record of how many people. And when we did the math, and I think it's fairly conservative math, we were all absolutely astonished that, 20 some thousand people had walked through those doors over the years. That's amazing.
I
That's more people than were in my little Wheatridge.
yeah. I think whether you're gay or straight, I think all of us kind of dismiss our own history and our impact on people, and we don't know it till maybe somebody else tells us. But you have some factual numbers to see how many people, you have no idea how many people you touched in that group and how many people you saved by just being there. So thank you. You're Saint Don.
Yeah.
So there, those Catholic priests, Don is Saint John.
Unfortunately, that priest is dead. I can't go tell him that.